Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Today our guest is David Cannon. David is a photographer, fly fishing photographer, who's well known and done many shoots for many of our outstanding brands within the industry. David's here today to tell us more. David, how are you doing?
Hey, good, Greg. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, man. Keeping busy, just like you. So I know we just briefly talked off air there, and sounds like you got a lot going on, and I can't wait to share that with the audience, some of the stuff that you guys have going on. I think, I think where I want to go with it, you see, you're from Georgia, right? You're in Georgia right now.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like halfway between Atlanta and Athens for any of your listeners who know Georgia a little bit. So I'm not in the middle of nowhere, but out enough where I'm not sitting in Atlanta traffic all day, every day.
Well, I'm assuming that's a good thing, not sitting in traffic. So
it's a very good thing.
That's funny. I love it. So David, here's what I want to do. See, as you're a fly fishing photographer, you're a writer, you're active, you shoot for some major brands within the industry here, because of the quality of photos and stuff you do. Walk us through like how all this kind of began. Like take us back to the beginning, because I know a lot of people or a lot of photographers out there do set their sights as what you've achieved as their goals.
Yeah, I was reading the About page on your podcast website, and your first line about you, like that, you could just like change some of the variables there, and that's me too. Where you said, "I created the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast because I knew I always wanted to be in the fly fishing industry," and that's my thing too. I mean, I started off like right out of college working for some like a small regional hunting and fishing magazine group.
Yeah.
Georgia Outdoor News and Alabama Outdoor News, and awesome people there. And then somebody, I don't think you've had him on before. He's got an awesome book coming out next year on fly fishing for freshwater stripers. A guy named Henry Count, and Henry's like a fly designer for Umpqua. He writes for most of the major fly fishing magazines, and he guides on Lake Lanier in Georgia for freshwater stripers, and just an awesome guy. Been in the industry a long time. Everybody loves him. And he hooked me up with the guys at, unfortunately, the now defunct American Angler magazine, but they've still got like Fly Tire and Gray Sporting Journal and some other publications going. And that group's out of Augusta, Georgia.
Okay.
And so I went to work for them and started meeting more people in the fly fishing industry. And that ended up being kind of my goal. Like what you said there about you, like, I just wanted to be in the industry. It's such a fun industry. Everybody in that industry is looking for an adventure. They're, most people are sacrificing, making more money somewhere else to work in the industry. And so I didn't really know, at that point, like how I wanted to be in the industry, or how I could, did I have any sort of talents that would line up in the industry enough to try to make a living. And kind of through a not crazy, but just, you look back on the series of events that happened and you think, man, how did that all come together?
Mm-hmm.
And just through working for those magazines, going to a trade show in Denver, the annual industry trade show, meeting my absolute favorite, still my favorite to this day, outdoor photographer, Brian Grossenbacher. And he had just come out with a book. Him and his wife, Jenny, had just come out with a book, Fly Fishing Montana. And the book is beautiful. Of course, because it has their images in it, and it's Montana. And I was talking to them, just telling them how much I loved, the book that had just come out, and how much I loved their work. And they said, well, our publishers here at the show, would you want to meet them? And I said, yeah, I'd love to just talk to him about Georgia, because Georgia, I think, would be a great book for that publisher to do. And so, ended up meeting the publisher, got a book deal. This was like 12 or 13 years ago, probably. And through that, I started learning photography from my friend Chad McClure, who I didn't shoot photos at the time. And so I actually contracted him to shoot the photos for the book. But the deal was like, I really want to learn photography to go along with the writing I was doing at the time, to sell freelance articles a little more easily, hopefully, to editors. And he taught me, through the course of that project, photography. And then that ended up sort of slowly over, a course of 6 or 8 years becoming my profession, which I never would have expected.
Yeah, it's crazy. That is like full circle. I love it, man. I love it. I love how like one quick introduction led you to where you are. And that is like, that is like the show. You know what I mean? Like the shows are like that. They just open up so many more doors, and the industry is like that as well. Like it's kind of cool. So here you are, you shoot now, you shoot your own photos now. You've taken your photography to the next level. You're hired to go on shoots. I know you have some shoots coming up here down the road. Like where, like now, like when did it become real that it's like, hey man, like this is your living? Like, cause that's, that's the next stage.
Yeah. So I was doing a few things at the same time. Like I was like a staff pastor at a church for about 9 years. Yeah. And I was shooting photos on the side. I was still writing a little here and there. And my wife is really creative. She actually, I think it was last year, she got named one of America's 100 most creative people in Country Living magazine. She's just super artistic, really gifted. And she was sitting behind me one day, like I was editing at my desk, and she was sitting on this little like love seat behind my desk, doing some work of her own. And she, I guess, was looking over my shoulder watching the edit. And she said, I think you can do this for a living. And I was like, what? We have 2 kids. And at that point we had 2 kids. And I never would have thought to do something like that for a living. I would have thought, gosh, photography, I've got a family, kids, all that. That's not a responsible thing to try to go do, or, something that, however, I'm 38 now. So that was probably 34 or something when she said that. And that's just not something that really crossed my mind. Like, honestly, I thought I love doing it. I can make some side money, help pay the bills, stuff like that. But in terms of just going all in and shooting photos for a living, I mean, I always tell everybody, like, if you would have told me 10 years ago that, hey, 10 years from now, you're going to be a full-time commercial and editorial photographer, and that's all you're doing for a living, I would picture things very different than they actually are now. I would think like, okay, I guess my wife left me and she's taking care of the kids. And, there's a lot of stuff when you start to look at everything, insurance and trying to save for retirement and covering all the costs that you have to pay for, when you're running a legitimate business. It's not cheap. So I think it really became real whenever my wife, Stephanie, said, I think you can do this. Mm-hmm. I thought, oh my gosh, okay, she believes in me. She it sounds like is maybe supporting this. So I started really kind of thinking about it then. And then just, it's like kind of the one thing leads to another thing where you go and shoot and have a good shoot and work with a few new people. And then they might tell a couple of people they know, hey, David's fun to work with, or does a good job, or, we were happy with this shoot. And then it just kind of, I guess, starts to snowball or starts to expand a little bit from there.
I kind of want to focus on that for just 1 second, because I think that's like a lot of how this, like, in my opinion, I know for us, like a lot of our success is driven on the fact with our brands and all that, is when we do things is, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is we deliver. Like we make good on our word no matter what. Like if something's at a loss, I mean, I eat the loss and I deliver. Like I've always delivered. I mean, and I find that since delivering, like, and not coming up short, like, is that what you find? Like the relationship grows and people are like, hey man, like they did it or they pulled it off. Like, is that how you've experienced it? And those doors do open for you, like new doors?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, because I think you can look at like, I don't know, say a service that's just everybody needs, like plumbing, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a plumber in Atlanta, and you can go do a bad job at somebody's home, and they can tell the people on their street, hey, don't call this company because this guy did a bad job. You can't get away with that, I don't think. At least not for long. You can't get away with that in the fly fishing industry. It's too small.
Yeah.
It's too interconnected. I'm not saying I'm some great guy that does everything perfect, but it's one of those things where I can look back on, I can go back to 2006 or 2007 when I first started working a little bit in the industry. And there aren't many, this is going to sound bad when I say it, but there aren't many jerks in the industry. It's mostly really kind people who are happy to see you, are happy to stick their neck out for you. And if you're not like that, I just don't think you last very long in the industry, because word gets around and people say, this guy or this gal has too much ego, or they don't, like you're saying, they don't deliver on their promises.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the tough things. It's hard to get in the industry because many people want to work in it. But if you burn a bridge or two, it's very hard to stay in it. It's very hard to recoup that reputation if you damage it.
Absolutely. And so it should be, right? So it should be, because it's a trusting industry, and it's based on, like a lot of recommendations and personal recommendations. And when I recommend someone myself, I mean, I'm putting my reputation, we're putting the podcast's reputation on the line, or the media company's branding on the line, right? Like, it's just, yeah. And it's no different for you. It's no different for you as well. And whatnot. So, I mean, a lot of those recommendations that you have, and this is where I want to go for it. Yeah, we're going to name drop here. I mean, you shoot for Bass Pro, Cabela's, Winston, Scientific Anglers. I know I'm leaving a few out, but I mean, who was your, let's go back to the beginning of who your first major client was, and take me to that holy shit moment, and because that's what it would be.
So one of these is crazy. I'll tell you a couple first, and then I'll tell you, to me, the Cabela's and Bass Pro one was the craziest, just because it was the dumbest idea that I ever had, as a last resort. Now, I'll tell you that, because that was, you're probably not going to believe that one, but so with Winston and with Scientific Anglers in particular. So several years ago, I had been introduced to an awesome couple, Michael and Christy Williams, and they're part owners in a group called Nomadic Waters, and they run these amazing trips in the Amazon. And they hired me, I think it was maybe 2016 or 2017. They hired me to come down and spend a week on their mothership and photograph everything. And it was one of those deals where they were, at that time, a newer business. I think they'd only been actually running trips for clients, if you don't count the exploratory years, for maybe 3 seasons at that point. And, they didn't have a big budget. They had less budget at that time to pay a photographer than I charged.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was at the point where I fully realized that if I didn't treat my business as a business and not as hey, let's go have fun and get a free trip to the Amazon, that I wouldn't be in business very long. And so I really had to kind of weigh out and talk with my wife and look at finances and everything to kind of decide, is this a risk worth taking if somebody approaches me about doing something that seems like a great opportunity, but maybe they don't have my full budget available. And just kind of instantly loved Michael and Christy, and I loved everything that they were doing. They give back 10% of everything of their profits into the communities that operate there in the Amazon, or that region where they operate. So if you go back to the 90s, when peacock bass fishing in the Amazon got really big and a lot of people started doing it, there are horror stories left and right of the companies that were operating fishing trips down there just dumping their trash from the week in the river or throwing it back in the jungle somewhere. They want to make all the money they could make and never develop relationships or reinvest in these river communities where those people depend on the river for their livelihood. And so it just seemed like there was some, abuse and neglect going on in those days. And Michael and Christy and their group really wanted to do things right. And so you go into a village with them and the people immediately light up. And it's not a paternalistic thing. It's very much like a relationship thing where there's mutual respect there. There's real relationships there. And it's just a really cool thing to see. And so, looking at that, I wanted to kind of beef up my travel photography portfolio at that point. And I had a little bit of stuff, but that would be I thought a great opportunity. And my wife said, yeah, I think you need to jump on that one. So I went and did that trip for them. And Michael had told me something that a lot of photographers hear from a lot of people, but it rarely gets delivered on. And that is, he said, listen, if you'll do this for me for this amount, I will put your name out there. And any photographer who's, possibly listening to this, you've heard.
David, where are you, buddy?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. And that's your, a photo credit or you giving me exposure doesn't pay the bills, and so you have to kind of factor all that stuff in. They have gone still to this day. I mean, still 4 years later, I think I've been there with them 3 or 4 times now down in the Amazon, and they have stuck their neck out for me more than just about anybody I know. I mean, Michael is a longtime Winston Pro guy and one of their advisors and everything. And he hooked me up with Winston. He pushed and used his relationship there to get me on their pro photography team, which I didn't ask him to do. I mean, he just went out of his way. And that's like one more little feather in the cap of my business, saying, okay, I'm somewhat legitimate, I'm growing in legitimacy. And so that opened up the door for I think it was last November. Landon Mayer was going down to do a trip. And, he was going to be doing some stuff down there with Nomadic Waters, with Michael Williams, for Winston, Scientific Anglers. He also, is one of the top guys for like Fish Pond and Umpqua and, works with a lot of great brands and is a really well-respected guy in the industry. I know you've had him on your podcast. And so Michael said, he called me one day and said, I think you should come down the week that Landon's going to be here. You guys would be like best friends. I was like, okay. And so we ended up working out a deal with, to kind of co-op a shoot with Winston, with Scientific Anglers. Ended up, Fish Pond and Umpqua both came in a little bit on that shoot as well. And so, it's for me, it's been people like that who are great people, who are well respected and who are willing to, put their neck out for it, stick their neck out for you. I guess if they feel like you said, that they can trust you and that you're going to deliver on your word and you're going to treat people well and deliver a good, final product.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of willingness in this industry to stick your neck out. Because what, you can look like Michael can look back on his career. He worked for Patagonia and for Orvis and guided in Alaska, guided in Colorado. And, he's had people in the past stick their neck out for him. Landon, same deal. And Landon has become one of those people for me. And I can't tell you how happy I am after spending a week with him. He and I roomed together on that mothership.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I don't know if you saw any of that stuff. I pulled this kind of prank on him where I planted desserts all over the room because he was afraid that desserts were going to run out every day, even though they never did. I would come into the room and there'd be like a piece of cake on a plate underneath a paper towel, like on the dresser or sitting on his bed or something. Yeah. And so I did this whole like Instagram story thing where I was, I hid a piece of cake in the shower. I hid one under his pillow. And at the fly fishing shows this past season, everybody was ripping him on that. It was so satisfying to me to see that. But I'm so happy that a guy like him is viewed as, I don't want to say like a lefty. I know that takes decades to develop, but if he continues on the trajectory he's on, the guy is super knowledgeable.
Yeah,
he is so kind to people. He's a blast to be around. Like he is a great angler, great caster. Knows so much about just all the technical aspects of the sport, about guiding, about fishing, but he has no ego. He's just a humble, fun guy, like no pretension about it.
No, he's a really good friend of the podcast, and in fact, actually, we have a phone call for Saturday. So this week, whenever.
Oh, cool.
And I know Landon and I have some future projects. So I'm just going to leave it at that coming up. But I mean,
That's exciting.
You just nailed it on the head right there. So it's super cool. How you mentioned, about that. But I am going to have to rip into him about the desserts as well when I talk to him next. I think that's
yeah. You need to like just show up with a piece of cake or something next time you see him.
Oh, for sure. I'm just gonna. It's funny. I know it's kind of funny. Here I'm going to a little digress, but a little Landon story as well. I know last year at IFTD we were at the fish bomb party, and I remember like we ran out of beer, so we had to go up and get some beer from them, and like there was like literally 2 beers left, and me and Landon came out at the same time, and I'm like, dude. We both needed 2 beers. I'm like, fuck it. We just each got a beer. You know what I mean? Like, we were just laughing because we were supposed to bring beer back to other people. We're like, nope, not happening. Every man for himself at this point. So, it's just funny. So, he's, and like you mentioned, but it's really cool how like it, and this is what I'm trying to really get across is like how like one thing led to another for you, and just opened up those doors, and people stuck their neck out like you mentioned, and it's come for full circle, and you've really created a business for yourself, like a viable business and a name within the industry for the photography portion, which is, with Instagram now and social media, like anyone can point and shoot, and then they start calling themselves a photographer because they took a picture of a fishtail. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they got they got the nice lighting or a filter or the scales, but I mean, it's a hell of a lot different when you're down in the Amazon jungle shooting and stuff like that. So, speaking of the Amazon and stuff, where have some of your other adventures taken you? You mentioned about your travel portfolio. Where are some of the places you've traveled?
Oh gosh. Shot in Alaska a couple times. I was actually supposed to be in Alaska right now. I had a
what
7 or 8
you?
day shoot.
Just kidding.
I don't know. I just decided not to go. No, it's man, this year's been wacky, hasn't it?
Yes.
I was supposed to be shooting. It was either 7 or 8 days of shooting for Cabela's and Bass Pro, a fly fishing shoot in Bristol Bay, and that was my shoot for 2020 that I was really like, I get excited about all of them, but there are some of those that are just like, oh, I can't wait to do that,
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I was supposed to be there right now. I've done like the Missouri River in Montana. I've done Venice, Louisiana a couple times. I've done through Arkansas and Missouri, up in the Northeast a little bit, Colorado a few times. And then a bunch of stuff actually here in Georgia. I do kind of some of the like warm water stuff when like Winston needs some of that, or Scientific Angler needs some of that. We have like 4,000 miles of trout streams in Georgia, which usually blows people's mind. Just having the tail end of the Southern Appalachians there, but we've got so much warm water fishing and great warm water fishing. I mean, from shoal bass to largemouth and weird stuff like longnose gar or bowfins, great carp fishing, all that stuff. So I do a lot of that stuff as well.
I'm going to have to go fish Georgia. I'm going to have to.
Yeah, man, you need to come down and, I can take you. You can just tell me what species you want to catch and we can go do it.
I do want to catch a gar. I haven't caught one. It'll be kind of fun.
Gar is a weird one, like longnose gar, because they're one extreme or the other. Like you'll either catch a longnose gar and it will fight like there's no tomorrow, and it'll be jumping, 5, 6, 7 times, or you'll catch one and just pull it right to the boat. It's so weird, but they're such a cool species. I mean, it's weird to me that more people don't go after them when your average fish is probably like 36 inches long or something like that, and a 4-footer is pretty common too. And it's just, a lot of people turn their nose up at them, but I think that's changing more and more. I think more people are realizing it's fun. You don't have to be a snob to fly fish. You can go just have fun and catch something different.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know what? It's just diversifying your fishing portfolio. Is that even a thing? But I mean,
Yeah, I
your
think so.
your species portfolio, absolutely. Look at like Jeff Currier. The guy's got so many fish, or Meredith
Yeah,
McCord. Like,
who doesn't want to be him?
yeah, exactly. Actually, he had a great interview with him. So peacock bass is his thing too. So, um,
Yep.
yeah, it's funny, right? With Georgia and when you didn't mention BC in your trip, so we'll have to get you up here for sure to do some shooting. There's some great scenery up here in British Columbia. So, and
Man, there's
yeah,
like Cabela's and Bass Pro does this little team I'm on there. I think there's 7 of us that shoot
yeah,
all this stuff for them, and they have one guy who is one of the best big game photographers in the world. I'm probably going to butcher his last name. I've never actually heard it said, but Nick Treherne, I think is how you say it. And just because of like work visa laws and costs and all that stuff, all the other 6 of us who are based in the U.S., when the shoots are listed for us every fall for the next year, we're all hounding like, let me go do the pike shoot or let me do the bighorn sheep or whatever up in Canada. But Nick usually gets all the Canada shoots because I think it's like $1,500 a day, work visa or something like that to shoot photos. To legally, legitimately shoot photos in Canada coming from the U.S. So. Yeah, if there's an excuse to get up there with you, I would definitely jump at the chance.
you bet there is. You know why it's so much money per day, right? We got to pay for all that free healthcare we have up here. So
That's right. We're trying to put the bill shooting photos there.
Exactly right. We're just leaning on you guys to try and put it. So that's funny. Yeah. So
oh my gosh,
it's funny because I want to circle back to Georgia, and I know you when you first talked about things and the publisher the meeting in the book. Now you've written a book about Georgia and fly fishing in Georgia, and you're currently writing a book about fishing and fly fishing in Georgia. Walk us through all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, again, that was just Brian and Jenny Grossenbacher. The format that this publisher does, it's no nonsense fly fishing guidebooks, and they've done a bunch of states. Usually when you pick up a state fly fishing guidebook, it's, a nice glossy cover, but then the inside, whether it's like fishing or hiking or, whatever kind of state guidebook you pick up, a lot of times it's cheaper, kind of black and white paper on the inside. And this publisher does like a big book. It's like 8.5 by 11, so a big book in the hand. And then it's all glossy colored pages throughout. So it lends itself to, if you've got some good photos to put in, they print really well, they show really well. And, their kind of thesis is it's not a trout book. It's the best of fly fishing in your state. So what I told Brian and Jenny Grossenbacher before they introduced me to the publisher was, Georgia, I wasn't even saying that I should write it. I was just saying Georgia would be a great state for that because we have about 100 miles of coastline, good red fishing, trout fishing, stuff like that, much of which can be done on the fly. We've got those tidal grass flats where you can go catch tailing reds up in the grass on the fly, which is just one of the coolest things you can do fly fishing. And then, like I said a minute ago, we've got great carp fishing, great striper fishing, I think we have 10 species of black bass in the state of Georgia. And then we have 4,000 miles of trout streams. So this book is like the best of all of that. So the first edition, I think we had like 30, maybe 36 destinations in the book. And like I was telling you before we started recording, the first edition was 160 pages. The second edition, 11 or 12 years after the first edition, they gave me 32 more pages. So it's going to be 192 pages. So that means more chapters. I think I've now got 51 destinations, I believe it is.
That's crazy.
So we're going to try to do some cool stuff that I didn't do in the first edition, like the Okefenokee Swamp down in southeast Georgia, which is bass, bowfin, big cypress standing there in the water, just a really cool, like black water, almost an Amazon looking fishery. All the way to, tiny little native Southern Appalachian brook trout that have been swimming those creeks for thousands and thousands of years, however long. So it's one of those projects. It's not a project you make a lot of money on. When it all breaks down, I make about $1 a book that sells. But for me, I view it photography wise, like this will be 192 page business card with,
that's
250, 300 images I've shot.
Yeah. Plus the experience of going and fishing those freaking cool places and checking it out and experiencing it and seeing it and holding that knowledge and representing Georgia, like you're representing your state. You couldn't do it in what you're passionate about. That's what you're doing. You're representing your state and what you're passionate about. So you're giving back. Like it's awesome. You make, like I said too, when I said I want to go fish there, it's because you sold me on it. And then hearing you talk about it more makes me sell it, which brings up tourism. As long as if there's no COVID, I'm there right now. But you know what I mean? Like
I hear you, man. I hear you.
No, it's
and just to give you an example, like I feel like the South, it's getting a little more press than it got, say, 10 years ago in the fly fishing industry. But it's still, we've got a ton of anglers, but we don't. I feel like we're still a little bit underserved and underrepresented. And I'll just give you an example. Like last week, I went and shot for 2 days with my friend Corey Chastain, who guides in North Georgia, like around the Blue Ridge, Georgia area, which is a really cool part of the state, kind of the northern central part of the state, near near the Tennessee line.
Mm-hmm.
And I left my house at 4:30 in the morning to make the 2-hour drive to meet him at 6:30.
Yeah.
And I got about halfway there, and I saw a whitetail in velvet. And this isn't going to impress you much being in Canada, because you probably see monster deer all the time. But I saw a 14-point whitetail in velvet just standing in the pasture feeding. And so I pulled over, shot photos of him and this doe that he was with. Just
nice.
a totally, incredible whitetail, especially for here. I got up to meet Corey, got in the boat, almost immediately caught a 23-inch public water rainbow trout on a dry fly on the Toccoa River tailwater. We left there after fishing that day. I think we landed 2 fish over 20 inches and then a bunch of smaller browns and rainbows. We got out to go get some lunch. We were driving down this gravel road and saw a bearded hen turkey and stopped and got photos of it. Went back out in the afternoon, caught some more fish, nothing big that afternoon. Went back out the next morning to a small stream. This small stream has not been stocked in decades. If you're sitting inside like a normal sized bedroom right now or an office, this creek is probably about the width of that. It's maybe like 15 feet across max. And I landed a 19-inch rainbow. It was the snakiest wild fish I've ever seen. It was just huge head, huge fins, and it probably weighed, at 19 inches, it probably weighed 1.5 pounds. I mean, it was just a snaky wild trout, which blew me away. I've never landed a wild trout that large in Georgia. So just there in 36 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
Had all that going on. It was so much fun. I was like a kid getting home trying to pull those photos off the memory card and edit all those. It was just a blast.
Yeah, that is, it sounds like it was definitely a successful trip. And furthermore, it sounds like you guys got in some decent fish. I mean, that's awesome. That's what it's about, right? In those experiences, those experiences in doing that. So, I mean,
yep.
I think those experiences are what keep us coming back. I know for us, it's the travel and the trips and having the fun and seeing things in the world. I mean, like you mentioned, it's $1 a book. Like, we don't get rich off podcasting either. So, but it's keeping that involvement and enjoying those memories and stuff like that, which is freaking awesome. So, absolutely.
Yep, it's pretty hard to beat.
When we expecting a new book to come out? As you're writing right now.
Yeah, it was actually supposed to be out already, but fortunately, my publisher is really gracious, and all the authors that write for this publisher, have full-time careers other than just writing books. So, it's a 2021 release now. Right now I'm just going through the process. I've photographed almost the whole book. I have 5 more destinations out of the 50 or 51 that I still need to go visit and photograph again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll end up rewriting most of the book. So Right now, I think the first book was like 60,000 words, which is a lot of words. The second edition with that additional page count will end up being about 70,000 words. And I'll rewrite most of what we had from the first edition. So I'll probably end up like rewriting like 50,000 of those words. So it'll keep me busy in the gaps between now and the end of this year, and then get all the maps tidied up. Look over the photos one last time and make sure everything looks kind of cohesive as like a big project, that they weren't shot by, 20 different photographers, but shot by the same person in a bunch of different locations. Mm-hmm. Try to kind of stylistically have a cohesive look, and then get it to the press and get it out in fly shops and at Bass Pro and Cabela stores, and of course, like for all the e-readers and all that stuff, the electronic versions as well, and have that out at some point next year. It'll probably be like maybe first quarter or second quarter 2021.
Nice, I love it. So then, speaking of 2020, before I jump from that subject, make sure you send us a copy. We definitely, now that we're so piqued in interest in Georgia, there we're definitely going to want to check that out. So, and brush up on our skills.
Do that, Greg.
Definitely love it. 2021. What do you got planned?
So 2021, most of my shoots, I will know. Like this year, I had I think 44 days of shooting on the books, like for Cabela's and Bass Pro, mm-hmm. and because of COVID, that's gone down to I think it ended up being 24. So I think I missed 20 of those 44 days of shoots that were canceled. So I also had an ad campaign shoot, like a multi-day campaign shoot for TakeMeFishing.org, which, like, if you ever watch any of the outdoor channels, they usually run some commercial spots there, and pick up like an Outside magazine or some of the larger outdoor publications. They usually run ads in there. I've shot a lot of those ad campaigns for them. We were supposed to do a campaign in April, and we had just done the casting shoot, got all the talent figured out for that, and that shoot got pushed back. We originally said June. We're going to reshoot, we're going to schedule it for June. And then obviously this thing has taken a lot longer than any of us anticipated. So I'm anticipating that whole ad campaign shoot to probably be next April. And that'll be shot here in Georgia. And that's a great, just kind of like a public awareness sort of organization where they really try to promote like everybody, all demographics, getting out and enjoying boating and fishing and, kayaking, canoeing, just enjoying the outdoors. So that's those are always fun shoots to do. And then come, I think, September, like end of September, the 7 of us who shoot for that Cabela's and Bass Pro team will get the list of shoots for 2021. So I would imagine, unless dates get jacked up or something, that I'll probably end up doing several of the ones that got canceled this year. So hopefully doing that Bristol Bay, hopefully doing the Missouri River in Montana again. We have like 3 of the best big game photographers on the planet on this team. So I don't get to do a whole lot of big game hunting photography. So hopefully I'll get one of those, 1, maybe 2 of those max. Those are a lot of fun just because it's.
Is that something you want to do? Like, is that somewhere where you want to go with this next? Like, what's the next level for you?
Yeah, that's something, gosh, the Meat Eater guys have like totally brainwashed me. I watched that show with my daughters on Netflix. Yeah. They love it. They're 6 and 7, and they just love watching that show and love seeing how they hunt the animals and then, prepare them and really show a lot of respect and appreciation and have an adventure. And so I've been hunting a lot more the last like 2 years. Hunting was always just like, I'm a lifelong angler. And so if I ever was going to take a day off of work or go on a trip to do something, it was going to be to fish. And the last 2 years I've been getting more and more into, done a pretty good amount of deer hunting. And especially with like a lot of my spring shoots being canceled, I turkey hunted like crazy this past spring, and just, man, it's amazing how a bird with a brain that small can be so much smarter than I am in its environment. So yeah, it's something different for me.
Fish
and
work.
probably for
Hey, David, I got to jump in right now. Fish work that way too. How
what's that? Fish work that? Oh, yeah. A brown trout or a carp will just make you feel like the dumbest person on the planet.
Oh yeah. That's
so yeah, you know, it's something I hope to do a little bit more of, especially just as a Southern guy. You know, getting to go out west and like photograph an elk hunt. I mean, that's being on a different planet for me. So it's so exciting. It's kind of, you know, I feel like a lot of times with, especially with fly fishing, I've got shot lists just embedded in my brain. Like I know what I'm looking for. There's also that whole that whole issue of like, if somebody's fighting a fish, I know what to anticipate. You know, I know the drill. I know what I'm looking for, what I'm trying to shoot. I'm trying to shoot wide, get the whole scene. I'm trying to shoot kind of medium and get the anglers, you know, reaction to what's going on, get them and maybe the fish jumping in the same scene. And then you're trying to shoot really tight and like get the angler's hands and spray coming off the reel and them stripping line and, you know, all those little details. With, you know, stepping into big game hunting, for example, that's a whole new world. I mean, you don't realize how little you know about something until you start trying to really learn it. And then you realize you're stepping into whole new levels and areas of expertise that you know nothing about. And so for me, that's one of the most appealing things about photography is that you can jump into, you know, a slightly different niche and it's totally new. And you're learning all new things, having all new adventures. And you've got to push yourself to learn and observe and you know, produce something quality. So for me, that's just an interesting way or I guess a fun way to keep things interesting and keep things fresh and keep learning and growing as a photographer.
That's you know, absolutely. But that's life, right? I mean, keeping fresh and growing and learning and pushing yourself and expanding, you know, where you want to go with it for sure. That's I mean, that's life in general. I mean, for most of us, absolutely. So, you know, yeah. I mean, it sounds like you got lots going on. You've done a lot already. You know, I'm not I don't know much about photography, and I don't claim to, but just for those that are listening and stuff, like here's where I want some words of wisdom, like how they should, you know, if someone wanted to get in. So, you know, point them in that direction, even if it, like, you know, if someone's like, well, I only got a Rebel T1 or whatever the heck they got, you know, like what equipment, like just some encouraging words for someone that's sitting there and wants to try and break through. So, you know, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I'd say there's a few key things that I wish I would have known, you know, when I first started. And one is, if you take like like a short list of 5 things, you take the knowledge that you can have as a photographer, you take the camera, the lens, the lighting, and the subject. Out of those 5 things, if you gave that list of 5 things to anybody who wasn't a photographer, but who was interested, and you said, rank these things in order of importance, most people are going to put down, I've done this when I've taught photography clinics before, most people put down number 1, the camera. Like, you've got to have a great camera. I actually have the camera as the very last thing on that list. To me, number 1 is the knowledge that's in your head. Because you can take, if you hand a great camera and a great lens to somebody who doesn't know anything about photography, and you have perfect lighting and a really interesting subject, if they don't know how to shoot that, they could easily end up with a photo that's terrible. If you take a great photographer, if you hand a bad camera with a bad lens to Brian Grossenbacher or Brian O'Keefe or Arian Stevens or any of these guys in the fly fishing world who are great photographers, and you give them a boring subject and bad light, so they've got all 4 of these variables are terrible, just not favorable conditions, they're going to still be able to find out a way to produce a great photo because they have the knowledge, they know tricks, ways to look at things, different perspectives, where they can make something out of nothing. And so I think for me, that, like, in practical use, my advice is really, I think, to do well in photography, like if you want, like, you know, some kind of business success or a little bit of commercial success or whatever, you need to know a decent amount. And really, it's kind of that, how do you eat an elephant, you know, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And so that's what years ago, I kind of had realized, like, going all the way back to like Ansel Adams, He was a great shooter, but he was also great in the dark room. And the guys and ladies, Jessica Haydahl is one of the best photographers in the fishing world right now, out of Montana. She produces amazing stuff. It's the same. It's different because it's digital, but it's still the same. You still need to be a great shooter, and you need to be a great editor. You need to be able to take that raw image file and make, massage the best things out of it without it looking overdone or fake. And so, like, I think the easiest practical advice I can give you or give your listeners is just a goal I set probably 6 or 7 years ago was to watch one YouTube tutorial every day. Like sometimes it might be a 2-minute tutorial, sometimes it might be a 30-minute tutorial. But it's amazing how much you learn about shooting and editing. 3 months later, you're like, man, I've learned a ton of stuff. In 90 days, you've watched 90 tutorial videos and haven't really spent much time out of your day to do that. So to me, I think that's the key, is beefing up your knowledge. And if you love photography, you'll enjoy every second of that. And then the other thing I would say is if somebody already owns a camera or they're looking to buy a camera, the lens in most cases, unless you're like a sports photographer, the lens is more important than the camera. You can take a $7,000 camera body, and if you put a little junky kit lens on it, it's not going to do that camera any justice. So my advice is always, if somebody has $500 they want to spend, or $1,000, let's just to keep it round, $1,000 is their budget to get a camera and a lens. I'm going to advise somebody to spend $300 on the camera and $700 on the lens, and get one really, really good lens and learn it before you buy another lens. Like, learn its strengths and its weaknesses and how you want to use it and when you can use it. And then when you feel really confident with that lens, like you feel like you can kind of see through that lens's eye, even when you're not looking through it, then budget and add another lens to your kit. But a lot of times people will get on, eBay or Craigslist, and they'll buy a really expensive camera body that comes with like 5 lenses that are all junk. And I just think that's not the best way to do it. Get one really good lens, and you'll be so happy with your work that it'll inspire you to shoot more and to learn more and to grow more. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest pieces of advice. And then, I don't know, the third one is just try to treat people well. Like you're saying, treat people well and deliver on your promises. And I've got a good friend, Sammy Chang, who just really started shooting a few years ago. And he's just such a good guy. He's the nicest guy I've ever met, I think. And because he treats people well and he's grown a lot in his photography, he had his first photo essay in Gray's Sporting Journal a few issues ago, which is next to impossible to get published in. He's had photos published in the Fly Fish Journal and Strung Magazine, and he now actually just became the photo editor for Strung Magazine. He's just a great guy with a great eye and a passion for learning. And I think he speaks to that whole kind of industry, fly fishing industry, the way it works, just like we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know what? That's why you're shooting for Cabela's. That's why you shoot for Winston, SA, and more brands, because of that. Because it took you. You got there. You've done it. You understand the lens. You work it. You know what I mean. So and built up those relationships. Absolutely. So I think that's great advice. I mean, I'm a guilty one of buying a camera for a body and not for a lens. Absolutely. Absolutely. I admit it. So,
no, it's hard to figure out on your own. The first professional photographer I remember running into on kind of my home river up in North Georgia, he had 2 cameras hanging off of him. And I said, man, I'm just starting. What advice would you give me? And he said, the lens is more important than the camera. And what did I do? I went out and bought a really good camera body with like 3 junky lenses. Like I did the exact same thing. This is why I can preach against it, because I made that mistake myself and then regretted it a couple months in. That's so funny. I've been there. I did the same exact thing.
Well, I know the Fly Fishing Insider Public, when we do our trips and in our promotional marketing, we always bring a cameraman with us and stuff for that reason, because we're not camera people. We're not photographers. We don't have that eye. We're fly fishers. We're media. We like to talk. We're talkers. That's definitely, I'm a talker.
Yeah.
And that's so funny. It's just having that eye, having that skill. So, and that seems like that's what you got for sure.
Well, and I think I'm an example of it can be learned. Like I'm not, this sounds bad to say, and I've had people tell me not to say this, but I'm not naturally artistic.
Mm-hmm.
But you can read articles or books on composition, on color, and all that stuff might sound boring, but it's one more way that you can enjoy photography when you understand, if you're shooting a landscape, you need to have something interesting in the foreground as well in the background. It's like when if you're driving through the Rockies and there's this beautiful view of the mountains right off the highway, in front of you, and you pull over and you shoot it. If you've got that empty foreground that's just kind of like the valley in front of you with no stream or anything, the mountains in the background can be as beautiful as you really see them, but the photo doesn't look right. It looks empty.
It's lost. Yeah. And I've done that. I'm totally guilty of that. I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you pull those photos up after you shoot them, and you're like, this doesn't look anywhere nearly as beautiful as what my eye saw. And so it's understanding you're looking at something two-dimensional, and so you've got to give depth and points of interest to your image so that your eye's moving around like it does in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. Cool. I definitely like it. I like the tips. I like the I think that's something anyone should do in life. I mean, I know I want to get more into fly tying. So watching those videos and stuff, watching like, what I mean? Like a specific pattern a day, like you say, 90 days later, man, 90 videos. And really, if you're already on social media, what's 3 more minutes of watching someone tie a fly or watching someone shoot a camera the right way or cast if someone wants to pick up a 2-handed rod and learn how to cast, whatever it is. Like you said, one a day. I mean, like that's a lot of videos. You're gonna subconsciously absorb that knowledge. So definitely, David.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's totally an achievable, attainable thing to take those little tidbits of knowledge every day versus trying to take 2 weeks off of your life and just doing 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day of learning. I mean, that's just not a possibility for most people.
No, definitely not. Not with our short attention spans anymore. So,
right,
myself included. You know what, David? I want to ask you before I let you go. Do you have any last words for our listeners out there?
Oh man, I think like when I think of photography and fishing, I can't do both well at the same time. So I think if you're somebody who's interested in photography, if you're somebody who's already a fly angler, you're going to be in beautiful places with your friends. If you're interested in photography, if you're going on a 3-day trip with your buddies to fish some river, maybe dedicate a half a day and say, this half day, I'm not going to fish at all. I'm not even going to take my rod out of the vehicle. I'm just going to go with my buddies and I'm going to photograph them. I'm going to photograph the river and the fish and the bugs and, anything and everything I see. And I think you'd be surprised because it's one of those things where some of my friends think that I just fish for a living. And it's weird. Like if I fish on these shoots, I don't, my mentality is I won't get that shoot again because I'll get the reputation of somebody who's just there to fish and not there to work. And so I really fish like most guys. Like I fish on my time and I shoot on my time. So, but having said that, that's because I've learned, I can't fish for 2 hours and shoot for 6 hours and hope that I'm going to do either of them well. I'm either going to fish or I'm going to shoot photos. So, I think just for your listeners, if you're interested in photography, block out a few hours one day and leave the rod behind and say, I'm just going to focus on this for 2 hours or 4 hours or a full day or, whatever you think is appropriate and really focus on it and try your best and see what comes out of it. I think you'll be surprised. The first time you do that, you might only come away with an image or two that you really love, but you'll be able to ask yourself those, why do I love this image? Why is it good? And then you can start to duplicate that, on future endeavors. And it really is amazing how something so intimidating as photography, when you first get into it and the learning curve seems so steep, how quickly you can learn and become proficient. And then just like fly fishing, you can spend the rest of your life working at it and still maybe not become a master at it. So to me, it never gets boring, just like fishing. There's always something to learn and always something new to see.
Yeah, absolutely, David, for sure. Totally agree. So if any listeners or any brands or anybody out there wanted to get a hold of you, where can they find you at?
Yeah. Instagram is just at David Cannon Photography, and that's CANNON. Unfortunately, it's not the same as the camera brand, or I get free stuff probably for being family. But and then my website is davidcannonphotography.com. So it can be found both of those places.
I love it. But I've learned so much, about photography. It's been great. It really has. So David, I definitely want to thank you. I'm going to make sure I put all those details within our show notes for our listeners to find you at and stuff like that. And I really want to thank you for being a guest, and listeners, I want to thank you guys as well for being a guest.
Yeah, gosh, man, thank you for having me on. Just, knowing the people you've had on in the past, I feel a little out of place. You've got some great industry people that you found on this podcast. So same to you, man. Keep up the good work, and thanks so much for letting me come on here and chat with you.
Well, we appreciate that, David, and you're always welcome back. So thanks. You've been listening to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know. Leave a review and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening platform.